What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the second installment of our redesigned petroleum factory. This episode, we're going to be doing the cooling system, and if I sound like I'm confused at some points, that's because I've already done this, and OBS didn't actually record the microphone. I don't know why it bugged out. I couldn't even close it afterward, but I had to, control, delete, edit, test type deal, and it's working now, so... hopefully everything works out. But before we get started, I'd like to point out there was a comment by Petrol telling me that there was a counterflow heat exchange thing on the forums, which I did take a look at, and I'll put a link in the description if you guys are curious about that post. But essentially, it was what I was trying to do last video with the oil and the petroleum, but explained in great detail. And from what I got out of it, essentially, I would just need more room, because basically I just had a small heat exchanger here, and I would need more room and a more controlled way of transferring the temperature. And I didn't really want to do that, so I decided to go with the steam turbines regardless. Not only for that reason, but also because I needed a turbine to cool down the iron once it got to a point where it wasn't really transferring temperature over to the oil anymore. But this is sort of the cooling system. Everything over here is kind of broken and overheated because it's been abandoned for a while. I haven't really been messing with it, so it's just everything's broken. But actually, let me go up here. So this is the cooling system that I wanted to do. Just a bit changed a little bit. So basically, we have some oil up top. A door opens, dropping the oil down. There's also doors separating this machinery from the room where the oil could spill out and turn into sour gas. And that door only opens when there's no oil in here. And then that oil would drop down further to a pump. But one problem I encountered, which, stopped the whole thing in its tracks, is that robo-miners can't go through doors. If you look here, even if the doors are open, it can't mine through doors. I don't know if that's intended. It seems kind of a weird interaction to me. I can't really off the top of my head think of any reason why this would be a thing, but it is a thing. So that kind of stopped me in my tracks. So from then on, I was like, okay, well, I can't robo mine it out, so I'm gonna have to just limit the amount of iron that I let into this place to make sure it never accrues enough to build up into a solid block that has to be mined out. So that's what I did. And it wasn't as crazy cooling system as I originally thought in my head. Like, I had this plan in my head and it didn't really work out to what it was going to be, but I'd say I learned so much from this. I really did. So let's just start with the build. First off, I did kind of do a rough estimate of how much this was producing per cycle, and I'm going to say on average it's probably about 1,000 kilograms per cycle. Now, this 1,500 was one cycle. Well, it was a little bit more than a cycle, but it was also with very fresh iron. So the iron had just dumped down. It was at its hottest point, which means, we're going to transfer a lot more temperature faster. The petroleum's going to heat, or the oil's going to boil up faster, and everything's just going to be faster. So on average, I'd say it's probably around 900 to 1,000 kilograms, because once this stuff starts to cool down, the boiling rate starts to slow down. All right, so let's just start with the pipe overlay here. So we've got our oil coming in, and the first thing it hits is a bridge, which pulls out oil over to our cooling tank here. And that's important because we always want oil available to cool this stuff down. That way it never overheats. The whole point of this was to have a fully automated system that never needs any kind of dupe interaction. And that's what I went for. So first off, we need to cool everything down. After that, we go into our main holding tanks here. I guess I should go through this. So after this drops its cooling oil down and it gets all cooled, it cools everything down, it then gets pumped into a buffer tank here. Now this tank is connected, well, the output of this tank is connected to the very end of this bridge. The input to this bridge is connected to the outputs of the main holding tanks. That's important because a bridge, when connected to a pipe that has another way, a pipe that has another output on it, the bridge will always let anything in this main pipe go through before anything goes to the bridge. So our cooling oil here is always going to have somewhere to go. and any oil in this tank is going to wait for the cooling tank, the buffer tank here, to be empty before we start processing any of this oil. And that's important because if we ever had oil back up all the way to this room and the pump not be able to pump, when this door opened, we would spill oil in here, and then it would heat up and we get sour gas everywhere, and it'd be just horrible. So here we have the output of the oil just going up to our shut off here, where then it goes into the valve or the vent. So this is all the same. Nothing's really changed on this side. Same with the automation. All this automation is exactly the same. This automation down here changed a little bit. Essentially, I just added a hydro sensor because it was a little bit better. Because if we were ever in a situation where there was no petroleum in here, this thermal sensor couldn't actually be changed. Its input or its output signal couldn't be changed because there is no temperature. You know, it'll read a temperature, but there's no temperature. So because it's in a vacuum. So we needed some other way to activate that. One way is you could just stick a clock sensor above here to manually override the door, but I figured I'd just fully automate it. So we threw a hydro sensor down here. So essentially if there's no liquid, if all the liquid's been dropped down, it's going to wait. There's a filter gate at 10 seconds. It's going to wait 10 seconds. Then it's going to open this door. Now this thermo sensor is set to below 270. So when the petroleum reaches a temperature below 270, it's going to trigger the set port of this memory toggle to open the door. And then 7 seconds later, this filter gate is set to 7 seconds. 7 seconds later, it's going to trigger the reset and close the door. And get ready for the next petroleum batch. And all of these doors that transfer temperature are made out of steel. And all of the tiles are made out of tungsten. And this is important because I originally thought that wolframite doors were the best. And I don't know if they changed the properties. I don't know if they changed the properties of the steel door at one point, but I thought I remember doing testing, and I thought I remember wolframite being better, but apparently not. So wolframite has a thermal conductivity of 15, which is pretty low. It's how fast the material can transfer temperature from itself to another object. And so wolframite is 15. Steel is 54. So yeah, that's almost 4 times as much, a little over 3 times as much. So 3 times faster on the temperature transfer. We definitely want to be using steel for all the doors that transfer temperature. The other doors don't really matter. I think they have to be made out of wolframite up here because iron has a melting point that's too low. But these ones down here can be, well, not that one, but this one can be gold. And this one, to an extent, could be gold or something else because the metal tiles are in direct contact with the oil, so this door is not as important, but I would still make it out of steel. Moving on. All right, here's the power overlay. Not that it's really important. You can just kind of see things, how things are ran. One thing I will say is that if you want to run these turbines out to your main grid, this is how you would do it. So I've just got a bridge crossing this wire so they're not connected. And then I've got 2 1 kilowatt power transformers here, and then the output of those transformers is on a heavy watt cable, which goes to my main heavy watt grid down here. So that's how you would siphon off the energy, the excess energy from this turbine here, onto your main grid and your battery bank or whatever. Not that it's really important to do so, but it could help. It could help. Then again, you could just have like a large battery bank somewhere over here that's connected directly to this system. And I have no doubt in my mind that it's self-sustaining because we have very little power consumers on here. The pumps only run, let me see, above. So the pumps only run like a little bit at a time. This pump as well only runs a little bit at a time. Sweeper only runs a little bit at a time. So you could easily stick like 6 batteries up to this thing, and it's never going to run out of energy. You don't even have to connect it to your main grid, but you are going to be wasting energy because the turbines are going to be running when they don't need to be. Well, they're going to be running when the batteries are full and that power has nowhere else to go. So I would recommend, doing this kind of setup and siphoning the power off to your main grid and then just connecting it that way. By the way, before we get into the automation, I noticed Liam kept popping up on my monitor here, and I'm not really sure why. He had some kind of urgent message he needed to tell you guys, so you can check him out there. Like, I'm not really sure what the message was, but I'm sure you'll get the gist of it. Anyway, the automation. So a little bit has changed with the automation. Let's just start with, we'll kind of start at the top and go down to the bottom. This is the top, by the way. This is where it all starts. I know it's kind of messy, but yeah. So we've got our iron limited. We don't want to dump just endless amounts of iron in here. We want to limit the amount that can come through. We can't really do that with a pump, right? Because it's, 2,000 degrees. So we have to do that with a door. And how this is set up is we've got an AND gate connected to a hydro sensor here, set to below 0 kilograms. So when there's no liquid in here, one side of the AND gate will be true. We've also got a weight plate under that, which, by the way, weight plates have the exact same properties of a metal tile. So it's made out of tungsten. It has the same thermal conductivity and heat capacity. So it's not gonna, you're not gonna suffer with any kind of like heat transfer issues or anything like that. So weight plate under the hydro sensor, set to below 1 kilogram. So essentially what this means is when there's no liquid in here and there's nothing on the weight plate, then we'll let more iron in. So obviously we don't want to let more iron in when there's, solid iron on the ground, because it's just going to melt back into liquid and we're going to basically heat back up the iron that we've already cooled down. We don't want to do that. So we want to make sure this room is empty before we dump more iron in here. And so far this has been working out. This little gap is actually important, because if you have a tile here like this and this door opens and closes, it will actually push some of the liquid iron up all the way above here. So we need a little gap right here so the iron could just like sit right there. If you take this tile out that's above the door, it actually lets way too much liquid iron through, and then it freezes into solid blocks which need to be mined out. And we don't want anything that needs to be mined out, because we can't use a robo-miner. Not behind a door anyway. We could stick a robo-miner in here, like right here. This would be completely fine. It would eventually overheat if it ever needed to mine anything out, but it wouldn't be in contact with it, so it would last a very long time. But we don't really care about that, because if the system works right, we're never going to have to mine anything out. All right, so the rest of the automation. Let's go over the cooling system first, because this is the most complicated part. At least for me it was, and I'm going to try to explain it as best I can, but I had some trouble setting it up. I didn't really know exactly how to do it, and then, I eventually, after trial and error, I figured it out. But I don't know how well I'm going to be able to explain this system right here, but we'll get to that in a sec. So essentially, what's happening right now is we're transferring the heat down into the turbine, and that's due to automation, which, like I said, I'll cover in a bit. But basically we're going to continue transferring that heat to the turbine until that iron reaches 270 degrees or below 270 degrees. At that point, it's safe to kind of ship around and, handle with other machinery that presumably is made out of steel. But yeah, so once we hit 270 degrees on the iron here, by the way, I didn't mention this, but you can kind of see, so the tiles here that are, conducting most of the heat are connected to this little room with hydrogen in it, and so the hydrogen is transferring its temperature from the metal tile to the hydrogen and to the thermal sensor. So we're able to kind of monitor the temperature in this vacuum that way, because otherwise there's no way to monitor the temperature in the vacuum, right? And if you're wondering how to get hydrogen in here, I mean, you would just, while you were building this, you would just put a vent somewhere in here and just let it pump in and displace the oxygen down below, and then you could just, fill it in behind. So wouldn't be that hard. But it doesn't have to be hydrogen. It can be pretty much any gas. It could be oxygen, fluid oxygen, carbon dioxide, whatever, and it'll still work. It's just going to be a little slower to react, and you may need to adjust the temperature slightly. But yeah, anyway, once the metal drops below 270 degrees, we're going to trigger a buffer gate here on 20 seconds. Now, 20 seconds is plenty of time. It could be lower than this. I just wanted plenty of time for the sweeper to get all of the iron. That buffer gate's going to open this door. It's also going to trigger a NOT gate, which leads up into this system, because obviously we don't want the door holding our cooling oil open while this one's open. So it needs to be the opposite signal for this door. So boom, this door opens, gives the sweeper plenty of time to sweep up all this iron and put it away. And then once the iron is all gone, this system's going to trigger, let more iron in, start heating this guy back up. But at that point, this will have triggered. So Boom, yeah. So once this triggers, once it heats back up, it's going to trigger this, turning this into a... So this will be a negative signal while this is active, and it'll reset this, and then once it heats back up above 270, this will go back into a positive signal, and then it will trigger this system, which is just the same thing as the petroleum system down here. We just have a memory toggle with a filter gate. So activate the memory toggle. We can kind of see it happening here in a sec. Activate the memory toggle, filter gate, 4 seconds later resets it. So it opens the door, then after 4 seconds it closes the door. So it just lets the oil drop down basically. And while this door is open, we don't want this one, so it has to be on a NOT gate to have the opposite signal of this door. We can see we've already dropped the liquid iron in here, so this is already heated back up. The buffer gate we're just letting run out here. Boom, that door closes. Our coolant oil drops down, and then the filter gate closes the door, filling up the holding tank here. Temperatures in here pretty good. Pretty good, nothing substantial. And it's not as if the iron itself is heating the machinery up. I mean, it is, since this thing is submerged, I'm pretty sure it's actually, the iron's actually heating the oil up, but it's only 270 degrees, right? Oil transitions to petroleum at 400, so there's no issues there. So we're never going to have anything transition into petroleum over here or anything like that, so we don't have to worry about it. The roughest, tumblest part of the automation, this part I had trouble wrapping my brain around how to get this system to actually work, because let me explain what needs to happen. And I might be kind of talking too much, but I like to explain these things. So when this iron is cooled down to a point where it's no longer transferring enough heat into the oil, which I have it set to 700 degrees, that's what this second thermal sensor is for. This sensor is essentially the threshold at which we stop transferring heat over to the oil and start transferring it down into the turbine room here to cool the iron down a little bit quicker. So I've got it set at 700 degrees. I would argue 800 is probably better. 600s, it's kind of getting questionable. The lower you make this, the longer it's going to take. But the higher you make it, the more energy you dump into the turbine room instead of into making petrol. So it's kind of up to you where you set this. I'd say 700 or 800 is a pretty good threshold for that. So anyway, once the iron cools down to 700 degrees, this triggers closing these doors. So it goes into the active port of a memory toggle here, or it's the set port. I need to remember that. I always say active port, but it's called the set port. So it goes into the set port of the memory toggle, which triggers this to an active signal. Now that's connected to a NOT gate, so it triggers these doors to close. That also goes into one side of an XOR gate. And then this sensor here is set to below 510 degrees. So when it drops below 510 degrees, it's going to send a positive signal. But that positive signal is on a NOT gate, so it's going to go to a negative signal. So whenever this cools down, it's going to go to a negative signal. And then this is going to be a positive when both of these are negative, I think. Let me goes in standby if both or neither inputs are active. Yeah, okay, it becomes active if one of the systems connected to its inputs is active. So we're going to make sure that none of its inputs on this XOR are active. So when these doors close, that's going to be an inactive signal. And then when this drops below 510 degrees, it's going to be an inactive signal, which it does frequently, you can see, because it's transferring its temperature from here over to the oil. And then, you know, it drops below 510, and then that'll be a NOT. Now, when this signal's inactive, this door is going to remain open, and we won't be transferring any temperature over the oil. Now, this system isn't necessarily needed. It's just that whatever temperature, whatever energy is left in these blocks here, you can see they'll probably be around 300-400 when this door closes. We don't want to actually pull the temperature out of these down into the turbine, because that's essentially energy that we're just going to have to pump right back into the oil when the new batch of iron gets dropped down. So like I said, it's not necessarily needed, but I figured I'd add it in anyway, because yeah, why not? So that's that system. Now the hardest part, like I said, I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, but I'm probably going to butcher it, do a horrible job. Anyway, so when the iron gets below 700 degrees, like I said, the doors are going to shut. This door is going to open. We're going to start transferring the heat down into here. We're going to activate the set port of a memory toggle. We're also going to set this signal going to the left to a positive, but that's into a NOT gate, so it's going to send a negative to the reset, which means that this output signal on this memory toggle is going to be 100% dependent on this line from the top thermosensor here. So 700 degrees keeps going down, down, down. Once it hits 270 degrees, that's the point where we want to stop transferring temperature into this room. Because one, we're pulling the iron out, which means more iron is coming in. So we don't want that new iron to be connected to the turbine and just start transferring its temperature right away. So we got to open these doors prior to dumping more iron in. So once we hit 270 degrees, we're getting ready to sweep that iron out. We're also going to activate this set port of this memory toggle. Now remember, this signal is going to be active because it'll be below 700. So that this reset port will be a negative. It won't be active, which means it'll be 100% dependent on the set port. The output of this memory toggle will be 100% dependent on the set port. So below 270 degrees, boom, activates, and we're sending an active signal over to this reset port. That'll send a active signal to, or wait. See, this is what I mean. I can't even fully comprehend the complexity of this automation system. No, hold on. I'll get it. Whenever the reset is active, it sends a standby signal. So this will be active, which means the output of this will be active, which goes into the reset port of this, which means the output of this memory toggle will be active. And because it's on a NOT gate, no, it will be on standby because the reset is active. I told you I'm doing a horrible job. I know it, but I'm going to try. I'm going to keep trying. So this reset will be active, which means this will be on standby, which means this will be through a NOT gate, which means the doors will be active and open. And only after we get above 700 degrees will this thing actually shut off and send an active signal to this, putting this guy back on standby and resetting the system. Now you can get caught in kind of a weird loop if you try and manually adjust these in the middle of its little processes. So I would recommend not messing with these. If you want to shut the system off for whatever reason, you just take this hydro sensor and you set it to above. There you go. You have a permanent negative signal. As long as there's no liquid in here, obviously. Once it's solidified, then you set above. But yeah, that's the system. I think I covered everything. There's the power overlay. There's the automation overlay. You can, pause it, screenshot it, and everything's there if you just want to study it and look at the spaghetti, just admire it. I don't know. You can do what you want. It's your life, your video, your time. Let's see. What other? There's one more overlay, isn't there? Heat overlay. That's not important. Power automation, plumbing. I've spent quite a bit of time on this. Honestly, I recorded for the. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the reason I didn't show the whole design process is because I recorded for like 6+ hours, and I was like, okay, well, I can't squish this much time down into a 30-minute video because I just tried so many different things after my first idea failed. So I just kind of jumped straight to the finished product because there was so much time invested in it. Trying to dump that into a 30-minute video it's going to end up kind of a chaotic video that doesn't really make sense, I think. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up or thumbs down if you didn't enjoy it, but bad things happen to people who no, I'm joking. Just do what you want to do, okay? Do what you want to do. But yeah, leave me a comment if you have any questions or suggestions or anything like that. And I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.